Okay, how's it going, everybody? So we're going to go ahead and read some J.V. Stalin today. This is a letter from the Caucuses. This is On the Road to Nationalism, January 12th, 1913. So let's go ahead and get into this. I guess this is a letter here. Among the decisions which will perpetuate the glory of the Liquidators' Conference, the decision on, quote, cultural national autonomy, end quote, occupies by no means the last place. Here it is. Quote, having heard the communication of the Caucasian delegation to the effect that at the last conference of the Caucasian organizations, the RSDLP, as well as in the literary organs of these organizations, the Caucasian comrades expressed the opinion that it is necessary to demand national cultural autonomy. This conference, while expressing no opinion on the merits of this demand, declares that such an interpretation of the clause of the party program, which recognizes the right of every nationality to self-determination, does not contradict the precise meaning of the program, and expresses the wish that the national question be put on the agenda of the next Congress of the RSDLP, end quote. This resolution is important, not only because it expresses the liquidators' opportunist shuffling, so this is back to Stalin. This resolution is important not only because it expresses the liquidators' opportunist shuffling in face of the rising nationalist tide. It is also important because every phrase in it is a gem. For example, what a pearl is the statement that the conference, quote, while expressing no opinion on the merits of this demand, end quote, nevertheless, quote, declares, end quote, and decides. Things are, quote, decided in this way only in a comic opera. Or the phrase stating that, quote, such an interpretation of the clause of the party program, which recognizes the right of every nationality to self-determination, does not contradict the precise meaning of the program, end quote. Just think, the clause in the program referred to Clause 9 speaks of freedom of nationalities, of the right of nationalities to develop freely, of the party's duty to combat all violence against them. Speaking generally, the right of nationalities within the meaning of that clause must not be restricted. It may be extended to autonomy and federation, as well as to secession. But does this mean that it is a matter of indifference to the party? That it is all the same to it? How a given nationality decides its destiny, whether in favor of centralism or of secession? Does it mean that on the basis of the abstract right of nationalities alone it is possible, quote, while expressing no opinion on the merits of this demand, end quote, to recommend, even indirectly, autonomy for some, federation for others, and secession for still others? Nationality decides its destiny, but does that mean that the party must not influence the will of nationality towards a decision most in accordance with the interests of the proletariat? The party stands for freedom of conscience, for the right of people to practice any religion they please. Does this mean that the party will stand for Catholicism in Poland, for the Orthodox Church in Georgia, and for the Gregorian Church in Armenia? That it will not combat these forms of world outlook? And is it not self-evident that Clause 9 of the party program and cultural national autonomy are on two entirely different planes that are as capable of, quote, contradicting each other as, say, Cheops' pyramid and the notorious Liquidators' Conference? But it is by means of such equilibristics that the conference decides the question. The most important thing in the above-mentioned decision of the liquidators is the ideological collapse of the Caucasian liquidators, who betrayed the old banner of internationalism in the Caucuses and succeeded in obtaining this decision from the conference. The Caucasian liquidators turned towards nationalism is no accident. They began to liquidate the traditions of the party long ago. The deletion of, quote, social section, end quote, from the minimum program, the repudiation of, quote, hegemony of the proletariat, end quote. See discussion E, list doc number 2. The declaration that the illegal party is an auxiliary organization of the legal organizations. See Nevenik, number 9. All these are commonly known facts. Now the turn has come for the national question. From their very first appearance in the beginning of the 90s, the organizations in the caucus bore a strictly international character, a united organization of Georgian, Russian, Armenian, and Muslim workers, fighting solidly against the foe. Such was the picture of party life. In 1903, at the first inaugural Congress of the Caucasian, strictly speaking trans-Caucasian, social democratic organizations, which laid the foundation for the Caucasian Union, the international principle of building up the organization was reaffirmed as the only correct principle. From that time onwards, Caucasian social democracy grew in the struggle against nationalism, The Georgian Social Democrats fought, quote, their nationalists, the National Democrats and Federalists. The Armenian Social Democrats fought their Dashnakstans. The Muslim Social Democrats fought the Pan-Islamists. And in this fight, Caucasian social democracy expanded and strengthened its organization irrespective of groups. The question of cultural national autonomy came up for the first time in 1906 at the Caucasian Regional Conference. It was introduced by a small group from Caucasus, which demanded a decision in its favor. The question, quote, was a resounding failure, end quote, as it was said at the time, because among other things it was opposed with equal vigor by both groups, represented respectively by Kostrov and the writer of these lines. It was decided that what was called, quote, regional self-government for the Caucasus was the best solution for the national question, a solution most in accordance with the interests of Caucasian proletariat, which was united in the struggle. Yes, that is how in 1906. That is how it was in 1906. And this decision was reaffirmed at subsequent conferences. Sorry, I just hit the pop filter on my mic. One second. And this decision was reaffirmed at subsequent conferences. It was advocated and popularized in the Menshevik and Bolshevik press in the Caucasus, legal and illegal. But 1912 arrived and it, quote, turned out that we need cultural national autonomy. Of course. In the interests of the proletariat. What had happened? What had changed? Perhaps the Caucasian proletariat had become less socialistic. But in that case, to erect national organization and, quote, cultural barriers between the workers would have been the most unwise thing to do. Perhaps it had become more socialistic. In that case, what can we call those, quote, socialists, end quote, save the mark, who artificially erect and reinforce barriers which are breaking down and which nobody needs? What had happened then? What had happened was that the peasant Kutaisi had dragged in its wake the, quote, social democratic Octobrists of Tiflis. Henceforth, the affairs of the Caucasian liquidators will be decided by the Kutaisi peasants who have been intimidated by militant nationalism. The Caucasian liquidators were unable to stand up against the nationalist tide. They dropped the tried banner of internationalism and they began to drift, quote, on the waves, end quote, of nationalism, throwing their last thing of value overboard. Quote, a useless thing, who wants it, end quote. But he who takes the first step must take the next. There is logic in everything. The Georgian, Armenian, Muslim, and Russian national cultural autonomy advocated by the Caucasian liquidators will be followed by Georgian, Armenian, Muslim, and other liquidationist parties. Instead of a common organization, we shall have a separate national organizations, Georgian, Armenian, and other boons, so to speak. Is this what measures the Caucasian liquidators are driving at with their, quote, solution of the national question? Well, we can wish them more courage. Do what you want to do. At all events, we can assure them that the other section of the Caucasian organizations, the Georgian, Russian, Armenian, and Muslim pro-party social democrats, will resolutely break away from measures, the national liquidators, from these traitors to the glorious banner of internationalism in the Caucasus. So that was released in Social Democrat, number 30, January 12th, 1913. So, yeah, that was J.V. Stalin, On the Road to Nationalism, a letter from the Caucasus. So yeah, well, thank y'all for tuning in. You know, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, Medium, all of these are Marxists. Hit me up there. Y'all have a great day, and the Dada Goy.